several hours today, current and former correctional staff, family of prisoners who've died while incarcerated, and former inmates spoke before the State Assembly Committee on Corrections, all raising concerns, starting with the Department of Corrections leadership.
That meeting began at 10 a.m. this morning and wrapped up about 20 minutes ago in Madison. Our Brittany Schmidt listening to every single person who testified today during this informational hearing. She's live in the newsroom now for us with what she's heard so far. Brittany.
Jeff and Cami, just listening to the testimony, I have 25 pages of notes and counting from at least 10 people who testified. So for more than 5 hours today, committee members heard issues that range from morale issues to safety issues to mental health concerns to lack of oversight for the Department of Corrections itself. The clear message here today is that these people really feel our prison system is a mess on several levels. Earlier this morning, a former sergeant at Oshkosh Correction told the panel that she was terminated after more than 2 decades when she brought issues to internal affairs. Another former worker who was attacked on the job held up this photo and begged the committee members to listen to everyone's concerns and make some changes when it comes to safety for both staff and inmates. Families with loved ones in the prison talked about a culture of drugs and cell phones being smuggled into the prisons by staff members. They also talked about the fear of retaliation for their loved ones inside if they go to the warden or DOC with concerns. One solution they offered that the committee members seemed to want to learn more about is what's called an ombudsman office. Minnesota has one since 1972, and it's an independent agency that unbiasedly investigates complaints from staff members, from inmates, and loved ones.
This is an office that could be created by an executive order or yourselves, and what it would allow is give people, like the other people that have testified today, someone to go to. Our experience coming down here is we've been ping-ponged back and forth, because you are the legislative offices. There's not a whole lot you can do for us. But we would go to the DOC and they would ignore us. We would email the governor, he would go send it to the warden, and then we would come back to you again saying, now what do we do? What can we do as family members? What can we do to help ensure that our loved ones and staff are safe in these facilities?
Now, there is a lot to digest here. Again, this was just an informational hearing for the committee. There are no immediate actions taken, but the panel of legislators asked a lot of clarifying questions. Jeff, Cami.